a name found only in the dustiest corners of archives, or in the tales spoken by fringe wanderers who claim to have heard ghost transmissions across the void. And while the gathered admirals and senators scoffed, massive reptilian strategists curling their scaled lips in amusement, avian scholars clicking their beaks in disbelief, crystalline diplomats resonating their tones with disdain, the idea of humanity was spoken of as one speaks of children's myths. A story invented to explain the unexplainable in the early ages of galactic exploration. An easy tale for fearful primitives to soothe their lack of understanding. For surely no such species could have ever existed that defied extinction and exile, while wielding machines said to rival the gods themselves. Yet even as they mocked, beyond the silver rim of the Perseid expanse, far from the lighthouses of the Council's fleets, a tremor touched the network. An anomaly, small at first, a whisper across the long-range communication grid, a signal fragmented yet persistent, repeating on frequencies unused for thousands of cycles. Its code not alien, not unknown, but hauntingly structured in a way that made archivists lean closer to their consoles. Eyes widening as ancient records were hastily pulled from forgotten shelves, because the sequence matched a language thought extinct, a tongue etched into forbidden codices labeled only with one word: Terran. Still, the Council laughed, for they saw in it nothing but an elaborate hoax, the desperate trick of pirates or rebels hopping to borrow strength from phantom legends. And so they dispatched a fleet of escorts to investigate the disturbance, confident that their warships, gleaming titans of iron steel and plasma fire, would uncover nothing more than smugglers hiding in shadows. But as their vessels slipped into the dark sea between stars, sensors caught a silhouette. A massive construct emerging like a shadow cut against the luminous swell of a distant nebula, its angles sharp, its armor black as the void, its heat signature silent, no transponders, no hails, only silence as it drifted with impossible composure, and the admirals at first dismissed it as a derelict, another dead craft from forgotten wars, until one by one their systems faltered. Encrypted locks unraveling without force, scanners rerouting to alien protocols, entire fleets rendered blind in seconds as if an unseen hand had reached into their cores and flicked off the light. And across the council chamber the laughter ceased as the first live feed bled onto the central dais, showing the vastness of the ship now fully revealed, colossal beyond reckoning, dwarfing even the council's dreadnoughts, its design nothing like the flowing curves of known civilizations but brutal, deliberate. A fortress built not for beauty but for war, with plating layered thick enough to defy suns, with weapon ports yawning like the eyes of titans. And then the council chamber held its breath, because from that vessel, without fanfare, without translation software, came a voice, deep, calm, resonant with authority, speaking not in the tongues of the council but in the ancient language of Earth, carried nonetheless into the minds of all who listened through methods their science could not dissect. 4 words only, echoing across the gulf of time and space. We have returned, humans. And in that moment the legend ceased to be tales, for the galaxy felt the weight of the truth pressing down like gravity, that the myths were not born of imagination but of memory, that humanity had not perished in obscurity but had chosen silence, waiting, watching, evolving into something beyond comprehension. And now their reemergence shattered every certainty the council had clung to, leaving admirals pale with dread, scholars trembling with awe, and soldiers whispering prayers they did not know they remembered. For as the ship moved, stars themselves seemed to bend away, its engines leaving ripples across the fabric of subspace, and where the council's fleets once stood proud, now they withdrew like insects before a storm, their weapons inert, their courage hollow, because in the face of that solitary battleship they knew instinctively that resistance was futile, that history itself was about to be rewritten. and the last sound that chamber heard before the feed cut to static was not laughter but silence. The silence of civilizations realizing they were no longer the apex, the silence of empires feeling the shadow of something older, stronger, inevitable, and when whispers finally dared to rise among them, it was with a single truth carried mouth to mouth, star to star. The folktales were real, the myths had awoken, and humanity, long forgotten and long mocked, had spoken at last. The Galactic Council of Xanthara sat in its grand hall, a vast, opulent chamber that shimmered with the light of 1,000 distant stars. The counselors, towering beings with armored exoskeletons and minds capable of the most advanced quantum calculations, laughed among themselves. They were untouchable, their civilization stretching across hundreds of systems, their power unquestioned. And yet there were whispers, old foolish myths about a race of humans who had once lived on a tiny, insignificant planet called Earth. Humans. They were nothing more than a curious footnote in ancient texts, legends passed down like campfire tales. The Xantharan scientists had studied these folktales and found no evidence to suggest the existence of such a race. It was all nonsense, a fiction created by primitive minds in their attempt to explain the vastness of the universe. At this very moment, a group of Xanthara's brightest minds sat in a war council, discussing their next conquest. Among them was a senior general, Matira, known for his sharp intellect and colder demeanor. "The humans," he sneered, his voice a deep, resonating sound that echoed through the chamber, "are nothing more than a bedtime story. Why should we concern ourselves with them?" His words were met with a chorus of agreement, each counselor agreeing that the myths about humans were nothing more than amusing curiosities, nothing to lose sleep over. The laughter was loud, sharp, and filled with the arrogance that only an empire with centuries of domination could afford. As the counselors debated further, a low hum began to fill the room, a disturbance in the frequencies of the stars themselves. Matira paused, his eyes narrowing as the sound grew louder, more insistent. It was nothing like the familiar hum of galactic traffic or the benign white noise of interstellar radio waves. The hum was unnatural, too precise, too clear. The technicians in the chamber scrambled to make sense of the disturbance, their screens flickering as they tried to isolate the source. A new signal, unexplained and cryptic, was detected. It didn't belong to any known species, any known civilization. "A ghost signal," one of the analysts asked, his voice trembling slightly. "It must be an anomaly," Matira replied, brushing off the concern with a wave of his hand. The council's collective belief in their dominance was unshaken. Still, they ordered a full investigation. What they would soon uncover would change the course of history. Days passed in a blur of technical analysis and algorithmic scrutiny. The signal became clearer, more distinct, as if something or someone was trying to communicate. The initial disbelief turned into curiosity, then apprehension. The signal wasn't human, of course. It couldn't be. It was merely a glitch, a random data spike caused by some malfunction in the depths of space. At least that's what Matira told himself. But the signal persisted. On the final day of their investigation, just as the council was preparing to move on to other matters, something remarkable happened. The signal snapped into focus, a strange series of geometric patterns, too perfect to be natural. The Xantharans traced it back to a sector of space where no one had dared venture in centuries. The coordinates led them to a dead zone, a place where even their sensors had once failed. With an eerie sense of inevitability, Matira issued the order to dispatch a reconnaissance fleet. He watched with detached interest as their ships warped through the vastness of space. He never imagined they would find anything of consequence. Then, in the void of the dead zone, they saw it. The object was immense, a shadow against the stars. It was unlike anything the Xanthar